I'm ready.
Welcome to another episode Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Karen.
Hey, Rob.
Karen, I'm sorry that the world hates your name right now.
Oh, me too. I have to tell you honestly, I've never much liked it, but now I'm liking it. I'm reclaiming it, and I'm saying, Karens, don't be a Karen.
Well, my name's Robbie, and it's like, they're like, okay, that's a cool name. They're like, what's your last name? And then I say my last name. They're like, your name's so nice, you say it twice. I'm like, yeah, it's Robbie Robertson. They're like, the guitar player. But I'm like, no, that guy is a jerk. You don't ever want to be like that guy.
Is he a jerk?
He
Tell me
messed
why.
over.
I don't know this. Tell me about this.
So we're going to be talking history, anybody listening to this podcast, but this is me
We'll
giving
start
her
with some music.
Yeah, well, with music.
Names.
Robbie Robertson, the band guy, the main one, he messed over all of his bandmates and took credit for a lot of stuff that he shouldn't have done. He's not a very nice person, and he's the reason why I can't get my own Twitter handle, because he owns it. No social media platforms is he active on, but Twitter. Just every day, 50 million posts.
No. What about real Robbie Robertson? Have you tried that?
I could, but
nice Robbie Robertson? Decent Robbie Robertson?
Decent, okay, mid-grade Robbie Robertson?
No. I don't know you well enough. But it was like, distinguishing yourself from jerk Robbie Robertson.
I just tend to not have a personal Twitter. I mean, even for the podcast, when you have a Twitter, which I know you guys are over there at, if you want to plug the podcast, we'll give you a little shameless plug.
Working overtime, you mean? I think your handle's actually Working OT Series, that, some weird thing. Somebody else obviously had the handle we wanted then too. So there you go. You got to work around these things.
And it's not about working, I guess, overclocking it at a job. It's more about working through time like history, learning about all the fun stuff and crazy things that go on.
It is. So, yeah, I mean, the kernel of the podcast is we examine an interesting job at any time in the past, and it can be the recent past. We just did a really cool episode a couple months ago with a lady astronaut who's just kick-ass. She's amazing. And we were talking about the space race in the 1960s, and particularly the way that there was a group of women who, in this really crazy secretive program, went through all the same training as the men who ultimately became the Mercury 7 and went into space. And we called the episode, They Promised Her the Moon. And you can bet she didn't get to the moon, right?
Yeah.
There's still a lot of gender inequality across the sciences, that and racial inequality as well. So, so the whole kernel of that conversation was, hey, did you know about this really neat historical event that there were women who went through all of the really brutal tests that you saw? For example, I don't know, have you seen the movie The Right Stuff?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's really worth seeing. It's great. I mean, as an anthropologist, I still love it, even though it's so kind of misogynist and it's really kind of blindly patriotic, but that's what, as an anthropologist, I find appealing about it, because it's culture that kind of encapsulates what Americans want to be, how they want to feel about themselves, how they want the world to see them. That's the movie. So I'm going to suggest you run out and watch it. It's Ridley Scott directed. I mean, it's a great film anyway.
That's a better review than I've heard of anything on Rotten Tomatoes, where they're just literally crapping on everything that is getting put up there. They talk trash on Norbit, and I'm like, that is one of my favorite movies. Like, they gave it a 3%. I'm like, what? Eddie Murphy plays 5 people. Like,
wait, how can you only get 3%? I think that's like when you get at least like 10% for putting your name on an exam paper, right? I think a movie deserves 10% for getting out there.
They were like, oh, budget costs. I'm like, hang on a second. Eddie Murphy played 5 people. If anything, that shows an amazing talent as an actor to be able to play 5 distinguished different characters. Yeah. It's like, if you ever seen Tropic Thunder, where they're doing the intros for everybody's little character or whatever. You've never seen that movie?
Mm-mm.
Wow.
All right, give me the kick-ass review for it. The better one than you would have gotten on Rotten Tomatoes.
Tropic Thunder is the last movie that you would ever be able to do blackface, and the fact that Robert Downey Jr. won an Emmy for it, it's crazy.
I love Robert Downey Jr. How do I not know he was in this? I have to go see it.
It's Robert Downey Jr., Ben Stiller, Jack Black.
What? I love Jack Black. Okay.
10 other like named
I
faces are in that. Matthew
all right.
McConaughey's in it.
Yeah, I could take or leave him. I gotta tell you what.
All right, all right, all right. You
That's
want
all
to?
right. All right. That's good. You don't have to tell me anything else. That's enough. I'm gonna go watch it.
All right, before going on that,
But
I
I
have to.
haven't ever finished why I was talking about the right stuff, though. I'm sorry. See, we're already
You
off
were
in
talking
funny
about space,
directions.
but I'm trying to go back to that. What do you think we landed on the moon? Do you think we landed on the moon when we said we landed on the moon? The Americans. Do you think
Oh
that
yeah.
happened?
Oh, I'm not a
Really?
conspiracy theorist. Oh, tell me why you think not.
I look at it like with everything that was going on, like we got. I mean, the whole not. God, this is gonna be a long one. The whole NASA program, like the even reason why our space shuttle looks the way it does, and all of our research came from the Nazis, and that was split up between three major powers: Russia, China, America, and I think UK got some too, and also Canada got a few things. But it was all in the Nuremberg trials where we forgave these scientists for research. We said, hey, we'll forgive you for your war crimes because we're going to use your research. And we actually split up the departments, which leads into all these different government programs and why everybody kind of went the way they did. Russia started trying to figure out how to create Jedis, literally Jedis like Star Wars, but more like peace warriors, being able to use your mind to be able to control people, which we ended up in the States, ended up doing ourselves, called Project Jedi. Um, Men Who Stare at Goats, if you ever seen that movie with George Clooney, that's what the whole movie was like, fun, making fun of. But I don't think we landed when we said we landed, because I think we were in such this high tense race that we were
Hmm.
already losing so much that to really solidify the faith of our own people, we were like, let's just make a video and tell the Russians that we got there first. And then we ended up going up a little bit later, not too long after. I just think it has some steam to it. I'm not saying I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying if you look at it, like, how many times have we, said, "Oh yeah, I already did that," but then did it a little bit later because, like doing the dishes or
Well,
something.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about this. I wasn't expecting this. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, Rob. So cool. I'm down for
Welcome
this.
to my podcast. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, and we can't, we have to actually keep a nice happy face the whole time because we're on video. I love it. It's totally different. I'm not used to that, by the way. So my podcast is, I can be making faces. I can be like, oh,
You can do
whatever,
whatever
but
you want.
nobody
I've
ever
had
knows.
voice actors on here that sit there and they do the craziest faces, but it's so much fun to do so. You gotta be free.
Oh, I'm free. I'm free. Well, so you're absolutely right. I agree 100% that the stakes were so high, we couldn't lose, right? I mean, they sent up a person into space first. They sent the monkey first. They sent a woman up before we did. The
Yeah.
Russians did. The first woman in space went in as a Russian, just up a little bit and then back down, which is part of what our story was about. That they promised her the moon, and Russia sent this woman up, and then it took decades and decades until Americans actually did. And we know for sure that women went up and have come
Yeah,
back
Yuri
on the space
Gagarin was
shuttle.
the first one, right?
Um, I guess I wonder what makes you think that. Ooh, sorry, my computer keeps talking to me. Maybe there is a conspiracy theorist afoot.
Well, what I'm saying is,
how do you,
when you,
why?
what do you
Oh,
mean?
sorry.
Why? What do you mean? Why? What is the question? I'm
Yeah,
just
like
saying.
why do you think that we weren't actually able to do it?
I
What makes
no.
you think we
I
didn't actually accomplish it at the time they said they did in 1969?
All right, so a good example would be like if you're trying as a researcher, trying to be able to create something, let's say you're placing yourself in one of these research scientists, someone working at NASA, and you start hearing, oh, the Russians have already been into outer space. The first cosmonaut, whatever you want to say, Yuri Gagarin, whatever this whole thing about him that happens, he's already been up, and now they keep sending stuff up, and their next thing is that they're going to land. They're going to try and get somebody, create a station up there. You're sitting there listening to that and thinking they did it first. We can't say we were the first ones in space now. And then you hear the people, and you got to think in the minds of people that are watching it on through the radio or on television, like, wow, the Russians got up there. Did you believe that, Jim? I do. I see it now. Like, I can't believe it. When are we going to go up there? And then at this point, it's like, then we have to be the first ones on the moon. And then there was this competition of, we're going to be there first. We're going to do this.
Oh
We're going
yeah,
to
no,
give this.
that this
Well, we're in war times, and everyone's already, the morale is so low because we're like, Germany, all this
Cold
crap.
War.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's all piling up and stuff. It's like, holy crap, we need a win right now. Daddy needs a new pair of shoes. So at this point, it's just like, we're going to make it on the moon. And then it seems like we're not going to be able to do it. Like, there was a lot of issues that went on with the space race. Every time we thought we were going to be able to get a shuttle and get people out there was an issue that went wrong. There was something, and it kept delaying us. Next thing you know, Russia sent off a spaceship with, I don't remember who was in it. But they sent somebody up there, and we had the fear of, oh my God, they're going to land there first. And then that's when we released a video a little bit. After we launched a shuttle, but we released a video that's showing everybody, hey, and then there was the famous speech and everything. That's where I started to question, like, I'm not saying that we didn't. I'm just saying that I would be understandable if we came out later landing on the moon rather than that when that video came out, because a lot of people point
Yeah.
holes at that video. And I'm like, honestly, it was a major push our country needed to be able to have faith in our society again. I mean, we were really, really hurt. Like, holy crap, we're supposed to be America. We're supposed to be this number one in everything.
Well, and that's the whole ethos of the right stuff. So I think we're sort of compressing a whole bunch, like decades of space exploration, I think, in this conversation, which is fun. Neither of us are experts in this, so that's
I
cool.
have many
But
PhDs, none of them in
well,
space.
that's all right. I bow down to, is one of them in astrophysics? No, but so a couple of things. I think the first thing I would say is I'm actually all for a healthy skepticism of what the government and the media says ever. And I think we need more of that right now. I don't know whether you want to go there. That's a whole nother direction.
Yeah.
And it's not history so much as contemporary politics, but it's, I think, the scariest and most important issue our entire world is facing right now. And, fake news is a real thing. I think it's not always what it's being described as. So
Well,
that
fake
puts
news.
my political footprint on the sand. But the thing about the moon, I guess I don't believe that the footage is faked. I don't know how they would have had actually the technology to fake the sort of data and the information and the visuals that came back. I mean, this wasn't the time of this space shuttle when we were able to go back and forth quickly. I mean, this was a capsule that was shot up and it came back down to Earth with all of these samples, which undeniably came from outside our atmosphere. I mean, there are chemical analyses that were done that prove without a doubt, this is moon rock, this is dust, this is, whatever it is. So
but that doesn't conclude to why they could have faked a video. I mean, if you look, people talk about the flag rippling or something. There's no air in space.
We'll put the video aside.
Well, yeah,
I'm
like
talking
I said,
about the
they've been up
scientific
there.
samples.
Yeah, they've been
Yeah.
up there. I mean, you could throw a probe up there and pull out samples, do whatever you want. But I'm saying when the video came out, you don't need pictures. You don't need any of that. That doesn't conclude with the video or landing on the moon. That doesn't.
Okay, so are you saying you didn't believe in the video?
I don't believe in the video, really. Honestly,
Got
if
it.
I look
Okay,
at
I thought you were saying
every,
about actually getting there.
no, I believe we were already up there and everything like that. But I believe when we said we landed on the moon and we were the first ones to walk on it, I think it just happened a little bit later than when that video came out. When that video was just like, hold up, let's shoot this real quick. And then when they actually hit down on the thing, we're good. I believe we already had grabbed samples or anything
The
like that.
eagle has landed.
Yeah.
It is stirring stuff. One small step for man, one great leap for humankind. I always wish they said that.
Well,
Yeah, it's stirring stuff like the, okay, can I make another example from history?
Okay.
So it's kind of like that famous picture at Iwo Jima when the US GIs are hoisting the flag up, and that's supposed to be this epic, heroic image of America and what America stands for and why we're the best in the world and the leaders and the defenders of freedom. Well, there's been definitive proof since then that was a staged photo, that it wasn't actually a real-time event. And I guess I'd ask you, does that make it any less stirring an image? Like, it's a symbol, and I think it's something that Americans can still and did and have and continue to rally around to feel good about what our nation stands for.
Do I
You know?
believe in like I see that's what I wish they would have just come out and said that it was staged. I think that's the
Oh,
issue.
me too. Oh, me
That's
too.
like I believe in what the symbol recognizes, but I think that's the issue like we were kind of mentioning before about what's going on with the world right now. It's a conglomerate giant lineup of shit that has been kept away from us like secret information. There was a giant thing in September about Area 51. Everyone was like, "We're going to storm it." I'm just sitting there like, "You're all going
Right.
to
No,
get
I
shot."
remember. Oh, I remember
Yeah,
that.
like it's going to happen. But when you look at during all this virus stuff, they had released that there's unidentified flying objects, that aliens were a thing. Nobody batted an eye because we were so paying attention to something completely different. The problem is where you get conspiracy theorists with MK Ultra, people that don't even believe that even happened. I'm like, hang on a second. I've researched a lot into MK Ultra, and the CIA has it on their website, but all the names are blacked out. You can't read anything, but it's like, oh, this, that, and then you're already 5 pages in. It's like there's only 10 words there that I could read. The CIA has a lot of this stuff on their website that a lot of people don't believe in. And it's just like, instead of keeping it hidden with everything, while everybody's freaking out right now about everything, you start finding out George Washington, instead of having wood teeth, they were actually the teeth of slaves, because that's what they did back then. But they glommered it up to make it
Well,
look.
it sounds a little bit more politically correct to say they were wood, doesn't it?
Yeah, but see, that's the issue is when you blend that. That's like saying, hey, Santa Claus is going to bring you presents. That's a nice little white lie. But then you're pissed when you find out Santa Claus isn't actually real. And you're like, wow, now I have this whole kind of pull and shift inside of my soul. That's a light example. But when you start blending details through history and start teaching the wrong stuff, and then now
Oh,
everybody's
it's
fine.
dangerous. Yeah, it's blatantly dangerous.
And that's what happens throughout history so far, is that history has been really kind of glamored up because it sounds better this way. And then it's like, hang on a second. This is why we're seeing outrage in our country doesn't know what the hell to believe in. Everybody's pulling in different directions. Like, I don't know. I thought he was a good guy, but then I heard he did this. Then I heard he did this and that and this and that. And I'm like, if they just came out and said the real stuff they were doing, if they would have told me about Willowbrook State School, if they would have told me about Project 112, we have a freaking doomsday clock. Nobody even brings that up. The
Oh
doomsday.
yeah, we're at something like 3 seconds to midnight now, aren't we? I mean, yeah.
I
Well,
actually have an article because I
do
used to.
you?
So I used to
I
actually.
guessed, but I know it's something that scary,
I
right?
used to do a podcast that focused on specific topics, and my buddy's like, just type in government on the internet. And I'm like, okay. And I typed in government, and I got all these crazy things. But it's like, it's a symbol which represents the likelihood of a man-made global catastrophe maintained since 1947. So it's still going on, and is the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. That is the first time on a podcast I've ever pulled out an actual factual thing. So anybody listening, if you took any information I've ever said throughout
That's
my
fact. Yep,
whole
that
entire.
was not fake news.
But if you notice, like the seconds, I mean, the last one I think was like, but when it last, I mean, at least when I printed this article was like in 2018 was something Trump did where the thing went down 47 seconds closer. And the farther you go down is the closer to the end game.
Right.
And I'm like, what happened with the virus? Did the thing just freeze? It's like you start.
Well, that they might tell you that the virus is not real and that it's simply something stirred up by the Democrats to tank the democracy and the election, and
And
you know,
that
okay.
is
But
more, but that is what you just said right there. That has more steam than the freaking space thing. I'm like, hold on a second. If you think right now that our government could do that, what makes you think they didn't do it back then? I have researched so much into just conspiracy theories, and I dived down a whole rabbit hole of it. Then I actually started finding out that a lot of the stuff was actually true. Um, Tuskegee syphilis experiments. There was a thing that happened in Willowbrook State
oh
School.
yeah.
Well, Willowbrook State School was an old hospital for Army people, and eventually turned into basically a sane asylum for people who are mentally challenged, where they used to inject them with hepatitis and all these other types of things because we didn't understand what mentally challenged was back then. It was like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this, so I'm just going to let you take them. That's literally what.
Wasn't there also a racial component in those Tuskegee trials?
That's because it's so much easier to test on something that does not look or represent anything that looks like you.
Mm.
That when we went to Guatemala with the syphilis experiments, all these things, it's much easier to test on someone that doesn't have the same skin complexion as you, doesn't have the same features as you, in a different area than you. It's technically, it's the same reason. Like if you were from America and you were talking about, hey, like America's terrible. Well, I would be like, yeah, they do this and that and this and that. But then someone from outside another country comes in and says something, we immediately get defensive. That's the same thing with the same mindset kind of with the experiments. It's easier to go somewhere else and then do something over there. And then, yeah, there you go. You already
Yeah,
got.
whatever the excuses, whether it's race, and by the way, the biology tells you that race is so unreal. I mean, it's a perceptual issue. Frankly, our DNA varies with people among people with different skin tones and from different parts of the world with different ethnic backgrounds by 0.003% or something ridiculously small. We are the same. But I want to go back one more time to this moon landing thing,
That one
because
really
your
got you,
point is
didn't it?
excellent. If I say, look, our government is behaving badly now, why would I doubt that they would have done it in the past? And I don't doubt they've not done it in the past. I mean, I think the key thing is history is written by the people in power, in charge, and people often have a reason. People always have a reason for writing history the way they do. History is not objective fact. There's no truth that's undeniable, frankly, because history and historiography are a record. They're a retelling of something that happened. Unless it's eyewitness history and you physically saw it yourself. I mean, even a photograph is not anything that is completely free of bias. It's all about perception and framing, and as you say, a video can be adjusted, a photo can be adjusted. To me, things that are convincing are empirical data, right? It's not so much facts, but to me, empirical data that we landed on the moon in July 1969 is the chemical samples that were brought back and analyzed and proven to be, yes, otherworldly, literally. You're right. The video, who knows? That could have been propaganda. I'm inclined not to believe so, but
But see,
that's a longer topic. But today, when you hear these things our government is saying about this virus, they're factually just wrong. They're wildly incompatible with the scientific facts that experts in epidemiology have been saying over and over and over again. So that's really the distinction I see between, for example, those events. Um,
well,
but
what
conspiracy.
I do
Oh,
want to
sorry.
say on kind of on your point is the fact of like what you were saying about the video and you were saying about this stuff. The There's going to be people that refuse to believe that that could even be a possibility. There's people out there now with the coronavirus that are probably refusing that there's no way the government knows exactly what they're doing, all these types of things. The main thing that I think is a giant fix and change we need to have with society is the fact of instead of sitting there saying you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, sit there and say, okay, I
Well,
understand why you would see
listen,
it
tell
that
me,
way.
why do you think that? Why do you think that? Right? You're absolutely right. It's critically important to give people a voice. If they cannot give you convincing reason for what they believe, well,
Well, what gets
you do
that
need to give them a
person?
chance.
There's literally like, especially when a lot of people were like, why didn't you post something about this? Why are you a sheep? Why are you doing this? There are some people that are just trying to make it through the fucking day. I mean, that are literally are
Aren't we
just
all? Wait a minute.
ex
Aren't we all? Especially
yeah,
right now.
but
I'm sorry, but
some people are so like, I can't handle anything else. I can't. I just gotta. I've had moments like that where I literally, my uncle sent me like 50 million things on this George Floyd thing when it all started going down. And I'm like, dude, I just can't right now. I can't with your conspiracy crap that he's still alive, all these types of things. It's because you end up
oh,
diving into an article, then that article, you're just going with everybody's points. And next thing you know, you start getting your whole fake news information starts coming through.
yeah,
And I'm like, hang
right.
on a second. You got to look at things clearly here. And if you're going to follow fake news, you're going to follow all these things. This is what makes history really, really difficult. And I'm actually scared for because what's the future going to be like? We can Photoshop a video where you're not even going to know what to believe. And back then, I mean, we're still kind of guessing this is what they were all saying. Everyone's like, well, Chris, the Native Americans, they were treated so bad. I was like, there's a side to every story. We know about, oh, these adventurers came over here, took these lands from these Native Americans, and they built whatever the colonies. Well, the Native Americans weren't these peaceful, loving people that you think they were. They used to eat each other. And specifically,
Oh,
yeah,
not.
there was a lot of
Mm.
stuff with the Comanches about eating babies and
Maybe
things.
we shouldn't go there right now. I'm an
But
anthropologist, and so if there are episodes of cannibalism, let's just call it what it is, in certain places
yeah,
at certain times, it's important for us, as you were just saying a few minutes ago, to not say like, oh my God, that's so wrong, that's so awful. You have to listen and say,
it's
so why do
not
you do
wrong,
that?
though. It wasn't wrong in their mindset because it all comes from an educated point of view. If you understand what they were thinking was that you would, if you ate like the Mayans used to do it, if you ate the
Yeah.
blood or
Well,
the
and that was
flesh
that,
of
but
an
that's not, I don't think it's
I'm just
antithetical with
hold
being
on. Let me,
peaceful.
before hopping in, let me give you the example I'm trying to get to here is the fact of when you're eating this type of thing, their knowledge was that you were soaking up the power and the strength of whatever you were devouring. The Mayans believed that. So when you look at it like that, it's not looking at it like they're awful people. It's looking at it from that was their educated point of view. Much as a society today that we have developed, we have grown to better ways of thinking. People have more rights now. All these types of things. Back in the day, in the 1800s or something, it was this whole different mindset than what we have now, and we're constantly evolving. So when you look at that, a good example I like to point towards is there's a Netflix documentary called The Redemption of Butt Naked. And that is General
Mm.
Butt Naked, an African warlord who used to eat people like kids, babies, all these things, because he believed he was the son of God. He believed if he fought naked, he couldn't be hit with bullets or anything. If you watch his documentary, anybody in the first 15 minutes would be like, this guy is a fucking horrible human being and he should be burned to the stake. But then you hear at the ending where he found Christ and he starts seeing, like, he doesn't want to be forgiven for his crimes, but he learned to kill. Like, he would hide in the water and he would come up while teenagers were bathing and he would just snap their neck and take them underwater. What animal does that in Africa?
Humans.
Alligators. Alligators
Human
do that.
animals.
Yeah. Well,
Human animals do it everywhere.
alligators do that because we learn from watching our surroundings, much as like a child that soaks up like a sponge. We're learning from everything around us. They learn
Yes,
to,
that's culture. You're
yes,
absolutely, it's culture. And it was culture then, it's culture now. And the reason I would argue that it's sometimes so hard to have conversations with people about these things that are to one group so abhorrent and so beyond the pale is because of this veil of culture. We all grow up surrounded by it, and it's just what we live and breathe. And we just assume this is the right way to behave. And there are other ways of behaving which maybe are not, at all in keeping with what we do. And I think usually it's not as extreme as, oh, well, we don't eat babies, because that's murder. But some groups might, as you said, because it gives them whatever soul power or energy they have, or who knows, we just don't even always understand what the belief systems are behind other people's behavior. And I would actually argue that one of the biggest problems we face today as a human race, globally speaking, is the expansion and the immediacy of communication. Like, we know what's going on instantly in places that we never would have known anything about before. And it's often a quick visual, it's an image, it's a blurb, it's an article, it's a secondhand account, it's, recent history, but it's somebody else telling us what they saw or what they heard or what happened. We can't make sense of it. The person who saw it maybe can't even make sense of it or has conveyed it. So, I think our biggest challenge to keeping ourselves alive and not destroying each other and this planet is to communicating better. Right now, we've got this
wait,
illusion of
what
connection.
what were you arguing? I'm agreeing with that 100%. It's kind of what
Oh,
I'm
I'm not. I
oh.
think we're talking.
You
I'm not
said you
arguing with you at
you
all.
said to
I said I think what you're saying is absolutely
oh,
right.
okay,
That
okay.
this is why it's so hard
I was like, did I come
to
off
have a
saying that
conversation
I
sometimes.
was about to say, did I
No,
come
no,
off saying
no.
communication wasn't key? Because that's my whole thing. That's my whole
No,
stick.
no, 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 no. I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
And I just put on my anthropologist hat because that's that's my lens on the world. That's what my training is in. And, you know, it's really scary because there's this illusion of connection that's somehow real because you can have a million Facebook followers and we can look, I'm in London, you're in the US, I'm not sure where, we're having this live conversation, clear as a bell. And, you know, this can be multiplied many times in ways that are not benign and productive, like our conversation is. And that's scary. And that's what governments that are unethical and, you know,
What I
let's just,
think is important, especially with
they
the
do.
social media, like we talk about fake news, all these types of things that come out, it's so corrupting because you see something that's an article, and back in the day, there was journalism. Somebody had to go out and get the information and get the facts, and yeah, next thing you know, a week later, it's on your doorstep on a newspaper. Now it's like any person's like I've talked to journalists that are like anybody's a journalist
Mhm.
now.
That's
Everybody who
right.
owns a freaking blog is a journalist. I'm like, that really dismisses so much, because how many times does somebody hear something and that's the first thing they run with? Like they just go
Oh
into it
yeah.
without.
There's no thought. It's reaction. Yeah.
So which is interesting, which is like if you go to a museum or something, and you're learning about a war, you're learning about this and that, you hear that, and you hear some person that's taking you through the tour telling you all about this war. You get that information in your head. Okay, find the person that read a journal that was one of the people that were involved in that war. Like I went to the Holocaust Museum, I went to Pearl Harbor Museum, but then I read the journals on the people that were in those incidences. And it's a different mindset. You're thinking like, oh my God, you're putting yourself in their shoes. And then at this point, you've heard the history, but now you get to actually experience it through that person's eyes and understand. That's what I'm saying is with the Indians, for instance, picture it through their eyes, what they were going through, what their mindset would have been at the time. It's not bad. It's not, they're not evil. They're not as all these types of things, but you can't say that they're these peace. You can't fight good all the way or bad all the way. You have to land in the spectrum of understanding of what that was, which I'm just trying to get
Yeah,
people to
fair
kind
enough.
of,
And that's
yeah.
hard. That's really hard. It's hard to get out of your own cultural lens. I mean, it's what makes it possible for us to get through modern life without stopping and agonizing over every choice we make and every decision. Because it's like, look, you get to a traffic light and it's red, you stop. If it's green, you don't. You know, you know you need to eat to survive. You know that children need to be educated. We don't debate whether school is a good thing for kids. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, those are just silly daily examples, but you know, without all the crutches of one's individual own culture, everyday life could be crippling. um, but that puts goggles on too, right, when it comes to confronting other views and other ways of life. And all I was saying with my whole sort of anthropological thing, sorry, I can't help it, it's like years of it's been drummed
Be
into me, seeing
proud
the
of it.
world
I
that
mean, that's
way.
a
But
great thing.
well, it's just it becomes really hard when you're bombarded with all of these instantaneous inputs in media, social media, news media, you name it, and you can't process at that speed. You don't know anything about the context that it's come from. Now, obviously, some things are universally awful, genocide, right? Anything that is causing anybody to be in a dangerous situation, whether it's, you know, threat to people based on their gender, their race, their sexual orientation, anything. I personally, as a human, think we all need to stand up and speak out against. There's no cultural excuse for abuse of humans on any level, and we unfortunately see too much of that too.
And that even
But
happens
yeah,
with just the average person at the store abusing another human, such as like,
yeah.
come on, speed up, man. Really, come on. All these other types of stuff.
Yeah, or I don't want to wear a mask. It's an imposition to me. You know, who cares that grandma's next to me in line and I could infect her? This is just too much of an imposition on
I
my
think
day. Yeah,
now
yeah.
it's
No, you're right.
become a little
We
bit
don't need
more
to go for
normal to wear a mask. I feel like I always have that with me now. Before it was like, oh
it.
shit, I
Yeah,
forgot it.
I know. I know. I did my fair bit of having to come back and get it. Although, you know, it's interesting. So I just moved back to London. I had lived here years ago for a long time, and was in the States. Just moved back a couple months ago and noticed there's a very different sort of practice with masks here. They're worn inside at shops, but not inside at restaurants or cafes or bars or anything. They're worn on public transportation, but everyone's walking around outside as if nothing's changed. It's really weird. So
Well,
no wonder. I mean,
kind of saw the shift happen, and I kind of called it in the beginning, was that people are just going to get so sick of it to the point where it was like, I want to go back to how it was before and all this other type of stuff. And then there's people that are like, I don't want to, not get in the whole mask and unmask thing. But it's like, I actually posted on Twitter, I was like, it's funny everybody's complaining about wearing a mask considering that you've been wearing one practically your whole entire life. Nobody ever wants to be their true selves when they go out into
Oh,
the
I love that.
kind of like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
distorted
Yeah.
perception, wearing like a false face in a way. And that's what I really kind of bugs me about everything, is that the fact that like nobody ever wants to be themselves. Everybody wants to be like somebody else. Everybody wants to be famous. Everybody wants to do this and do that. I'm like, just be you and you'll get there. Like, I mean, it's hard. I understand, because I think the aspirations in our society have completely shifted from like 2000, I would say around 2008. And I always use this movie for example, Don't Mess with the Zohan, with Adam Sandler.
Okay.
That, I don't know if you've ever seen that.
But I know of Adam Sandler's work, so I can imagine what it's like. No, I
Okay.
haven't seen it.
It is like every stereotypical racist thing shoved into a movie
Yeah.
between Israelis and Pakistanis. I mean, the ending, there's a hacky sack tournament, and everybody loves Mariah Carey. It's just this. It's so ridiculous that it's laughable. But that couldn't be played today; it would be canceled immediately because of all these different types of things of where we're going as a society now. I'm like, hang on a second. When it comes to cancel culture, when it comes to all these things, just because you're so now it's turning into this like thing of, this is the best way for me to get attention and me to get famous. There was a guy that had complained about an all women's comedy night, and he thought that, oh, you're not gonna let me in because I'm a dude, and then he got immediately offended. I'm like, but that works on the same side of both
Yeah.
spectrums.
Right.
It's
Right.
the
Right.
same thing if it was an all male comedy night and then someone told me, no, every comedy night's a male comedy night. I'm like, but that's how your perspective is. There's another woman out there that doesn't feel that way at all. There's all these different perspectives you got to keep into account. And this is where we're seeing a giant miscommunication and this whole thing of like, I don't know. I look at the world and I'm like, man, we're all just being tugged in completely different directions. It's like old school torture where they used to tie like a horse up to every limb and then just rip you off in different directions. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
us. Like, we're
Yeah,
just,
that's yeah. And we allow it to happen and we participate by doing social media. I hate social media. I find it really awkward and weird. And I don't think there's anybody who just put stuff up without thinking about whether it's what they want to convey about themselves. And honestly, if I didn't work in popular media, I wouldn't have any social media accounts. If I don't have anything up there, I don't get work because the hiring agents are like, well, what's her deal? Why is she not out there? So I, you're not rewarded for just being yourself. I think you're absolutely right. The only way to find success and to enjoy the one life you have on earth is to just be yourself, do your thing, find out what that is, and then just be true to it. But you don't get rewarded for that in social media. It's all about, this fear of missing out, and are you keeping up, and how do you compare? And, it's really dispiriting, actually.
and it's like, we could use it with what it was invented for, which was using it for information. Such as like, people are like, I'm going to get the Neuralink because then we'll be able to have the internet on our brain where I can literally research anything and get the proper information. I'll give it 2 weeks until you start looking up porn on that thing in the back of your head, because that's what's everything where everybody complains, but it's fixed this problem. It's fixed this issue. We never had that issue until it was created. It just solved the issue that it created in the first place. Cell phones, all these other types of things, makes it amazing to be able to call somebody off in a whole different place. Computers,
Oh yeah.
Zoom, oh my God, it's benefited the most out of coronavirus. Being able to have this conversation, amazing. But this
Yeah,
is
my
not what a
entire
lot of,
podcast has been done over. No, 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 I know.
but it's
I
not
know.
what a lot of people are choosing to do with it. A lot of people are doing other things and going on to these
Right.
other routes and just having this crazy hysteria fun with it, which is okay. But you got to understand, it's like, there's a lot of stuff where we've taken it the complete opposite direction that it was intended for. Same thing with, I have a fear of the Neuralink, is that everybody's just going to be doing the dumbest thing, downloading apps into their head, and it's going to be this whole thing. That's different than when they're telling you in the beginning that it's going to be like, hey, you can have the Wikipedia at your head. You can have any
I don't think
facts
I
you want
want that
there.
in my head. I want to be able to not
It's
think
fun.
about
You
that.
got to go down
Well,
that
it's
route.
almost like the self-driving cars. Like who really think that's a good idea?
It's because it's
Really?
gonna feed our laziness factor if a
Like
car can drive for
just
you.
yeah, I'm sorry, but there's always going to be the fulcrum where there's a moral decision that the AI in the car can't make.
I'm not pro self-driving car. I am pro self-driving ships if they ever make that. Because I look, spending years on the
Well, there's a
water.
lot more space out on the ocean than there is in a car,
If
and you can
Magellan would have
just
had a
drift.
self-driving ship, he probably would have got to where he was going, not everywhere else.
That's right. Amen.
I'm just
Wow.
saying that the factor of history is this amazing thing from when the first person decided we need to record this information down so we'll have something to that future generations will look upon. I mean, what the most I actually ever really enjoyed about history besides doing my own research, but what school taught me was I took an art history class. And this is when I was heavily into studying psychology. So I was like, all right, my teacher knew that. He was like, I'm going to give you this topic where you're going to have to analyze using psychology ways of why this person painted it like this. I forgot the actual method that he told me it was, but it showed a woman with it was shot above the eyes. So it was just her eyes and then the forehead. And then above where her hair was space. And you're supposed to understand what that meant. And it looked like there was like two layers of eyes. So there was another pair kind of a little bit lower. And I was like, seems like we're masking our creativity. And that was just my kind of interpretation of it. And he was like, I never explained. And then I wrote this whole paper on it. And he was like, I got to read it in front of the class. And I'm like, wow, I got F's all my whole entire life. And you're telling me I get a paper. He's like, because you really understood something. And I was like, it's not. And I even explained, like, it's not just another bowl of fruit painting that everybody sees, but analyze that further. What were they describing? Why is it on that certain tablecloth? Are they in Italy? Are they in Rome? Let your mind wander. And that's when I started to really understand a lot of things. I never understood orchestra. I never understood symphonies, all these types of things. Who the hell wants to listen to that? I want to listen to Green Day or whatever, something with my teenage angst. But then I saw like this whole performance in
You
Symphony
should try
Live.
Beethoven then. He's very angsty.
My middle name is named after a famous composer, so I probably
Is
should look
it?
that one up.
Oh, I
Um,
know. He's the best for angst, I'm telling you. But
but
anyway, sorry.
when you're
Green Day's good too.
when you're listening to this type of stuff and you're really trying to, instead of follow what's trendy, enjoy it for the creativity of it, you understand more. And like, for instance, with art history, when I learned that the cave paintings, why they were, everyone just thought they were like, oh, like, was the person blind? It was like, no, they were using oil lamps with fat in the cave. They would light these little candles made of fat
Yeah.
and they would flicker. And the paintings that they had on the walls in these caves would go back and forth like a movie. And now we're like, oh my God, were they making movies back then? It's like, oh, look at that, look at that. Under it, that's the shit. Right? Even saying that, I got goosebumps. Like that's
Yeah.
history in the making right there. And I'm like, whoa, like that's what's so fascinating about it. And I was excited to get you on because I was like, I understand why you have a fascination with this stuff because if anybody really looks into anything, whether you want to dive into conspiracy theories, it's all so enjoyable and entertaining if you really let it be. Instead of focusing on so much of the hate, focus on these crazy, amazing things.
Oh, it's all
That
great stories. I mean,
yes,
good history is good storytelling. That is my fundamental belief. And if you're not telling good stories with your history, you're really missing the point. And I think our conversation, it actually the whole conversation has just reinforced that idea because we've really talked about perspective and how important that is and how it permeates everything. What is created and sent out into the world to be consumed, and how people receive and interpret, right? So, yeah, I mean, the first people who realized history was worth recording just told stories again and again around the campfire to each other, before the advent of writing. And cave painting absolutely was a hugely important step in symbolic representation of ideas and beliefs and identity. Like, I'm here, I'm in this cave, this is my handprint. Interestingly, those cave paintings are like 30,000, 40,000 years old, the ones in France, for example. And they're almost entirely animal figures. There are very few cases of sort of a human a hand or representation of people until quite a bit later. And there are all sorts of interpretations that archaeologists and art historians make about that. You know, can we know for sure? Does anyone have the definitive answer why that is the case? No. But I think the key thing is to just go in there, as you say, with an open mind to look at the evidence. And you always bring what you know from the present day to it, which is why, you know, I think you said, oh, were they making movies in the ancient times? Well, no, not the way we think about it. But of course you're going to think about that, because that's the environment that we're in, you know, and that's where history really is. It doesn't live in the past. It lives today. It lives in all of us. I mean, the beginning of our conversation's already history, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to pick one thing, like besides the reason why you started the podcast, but if you had to pick one thing through history that you found the most fascinating, something that really, tickles your fancy, I would say, that's like one that's like, oh, I love learning about that. What is it?
Oh, I'll tell you what, if I can make it a category of things, because there wasn't sort of one like fact that blew my mind so
Okay.
much that it stood out. But what I find really encouraging and also just devastating is how it's all the same. It's just human nature is what it is. And whether you're talking about ancient prehistory, when humans are trying to figure out how to survive on the savannas of Africa because the big beasts, the mastodons and all this, are eating the good meat, right? So this idea of man the hunter is just a complete bunk. I mean, we were scavengers. We at best kind of took whatever bones were left after, first the big cats and then the hyenas scavenged it and chewed whatever bones we could. Like, the best meat we could get was when we figured out how to make stone tools to smash open long bones and eat the marrow out of the bones. That's man the hunter. That's the reality that empirical fact tells us, right? So that sounds so different from what we need to do to survive and thrive today. But is it really? It's like you're in an environment that's very harsh then and now. There are limited ways in which you can support yourself and your family and not just survive, but thrive. And you just figure it out, man. You just figure it out every day. They got really creative and finally trial and error figured out how to make something to open those bones so that they could eat more than just berries and nuts and, fish that they could catch. Today, I mean, at a time like this, coronavirus, on top of what's been going on with the global economy and the complete lack of job security most people have, people, middle-aged and older, and young people who decide to go to college and go deeply into debt, and come out and there's no jobs. Now we have this pandemic, at the end of the day, what really matters is exactly the same as what mattered to those prehistoric people. It's like, okay, this sucks. The circumstances are not ideal, but I'm going to adapt. I'm going to figure out how I can stay alive and keep people I care about alive. We're just the same. Every single historical event, you really can break it down to something about survival, the need to connect, right? Human nature and its violence and its ambition and its need to put oneself over others. I mean, it's like, they say there are 12 plots only in all of literature, really, when you boil them down. Well, I think there's even fewer plots than that in kind of the human story, human nature. We're just, it's all the same, just different time, different place, different set of circumstances, and
The
the way
true
we deal
fact
with
of
it.
history is doomed to repeat itself. People talk about like,
Sure hell is. Yeah, that's why.
why is
If you
everybody
ask me.
split up into groups and all these things today? I'm like, we've been doing that throughout the years. There used to be
Right.
tribes and all these types of things. It's so much easier to have a bunch of people that agree with you rather than have someone that doesn't. And I'm like, I think the mindset that needs to be shifted into is having that person that doesn't agree with you, having that person, because then you understand a whole different perspective. You guys,
Totally.
there's not really a disagreement going on. It's more of the fact of you guys have two different influences that have caused you to think the way you do.
Yeah, different
Understand
worldview.
those things.
Different worldview. If I tell you what, if we could solve that problem, we'd solve every other problem. Honestly, even climate change, which it is fundamentally a problem of cooperation. It's like this thing, I don't know if you've ever heard about the fisherman's problem, but this was in colonial America, it was this problem that was defined around overfishing the cod banks, and everybody knew they were fishing too much and that it was killing off this really important species, that the species was important economically, but also, to sort of support people's diet. And yet nobody's willing to fish less because they know other people will continue to fish more. And so they might as well get theirs too, right? And so nobody's willing to.
I'll give
But
you a
this
better
is,
example of people that throw trash out thinking, oh, someone will get that. Or,
oh yeah,
oh,
it's the same.
he's driving a Prius. I could drive my diesel truck. It's like, yeah.
Right. He's making it up for me.
Nah,
Right.
that makes sense. That's the logic we think in. I look at like throughout history, we're all kind of, even now, we're all still trying to figure it out. Like this, which really interesting to learn about was in Australia, rabbits or bunnies, whatever you want to call them, they're banned because they
Oh.
have an overpopulation problem because they're not
Oh.
indigenous to that area. And a guy, one of the English settlers in 1812 brought a couple of rabbits over and literally breeding like
Oh,
rabbits.
I saw a story about that. And
They've,
they're like overrunning. There's like
yeah,
an island that's overrun by rabbits.
I learned this like last year around this time from a guy who was in Australia. His name is Zach Briers. And a year later, I had his wonderful mom on, which was amazing. But he was telling me, he was like, yeah, you can't go into Melbourne. You can't go into Melbourne with any rabbits. They're all banned outside of the town, everything. I'm like, wow. But you start to look, that's everywhere. We introduce something that's not supposed to be there. Next thing you know, we try and introduce something to kill that thing. And the next thing you know, you're all messed up. We're like, well,
I know. Ecosystems
man-made.
are fragile. They are. And we've really done a great job bunging them up all over the place. So, yeah. Again, history, though, I mean, you can trace this throughout time. I mean, this is species extinction over time is very much the impact of human action, right? Decisions.
If you had to pick one that you didn't like to learn about the most, so like if you came, well, I mean, we talked about like you said a category of your favorite ones. I was kind of hoping you'd pick like maybe
Oh, like
like a
one
specific
thing,
thing,
a
like
specific thing.
like for example, I'll give you one that's not even in American history, but I'm
Okay.
so surprised it's not in history books all over the place. Night witches.
Night
So
witch.
in World War
Tell me
II,
about it.
it's in Russian history. In World War II, these Russian women stepped up, flew these crop dusting airplanes in 40, I mean, in Russia in winter, flew in crop dusting airplanes, which is the airplane that's opened, dropping bombs on the Nazis in the middle of the night. The Nazis would hear these noises and be like, it sounds like witches on a broom. And that's why they were called night witches, because they
Oh,
would fly in small teams and drop bombs while the men were fighting or the men were off somewhere. They were trying their best to help in any way they can, kind of like Rosie the Riveter scenario in America, but this was in Russia. And these women, I mean, they were wearing uniforms that were fit for guys where they would have to cut them and they would have to like tuck them in their boots to be able to fit in the boots. And they're flying in crop dusting airplanes in, I mean, minus some degrees of weather. I don't know what it's like in Russia on their coldest nights, but freezing in an open airplane. And they're literally stuffing themselves in uniforms, like trying their best to fill out these uniforms, everything that are fit for a different gender. And it was like hearing that and then hearing how hard they fought because they wanted to provide something, they wanted to do something, and that doesn't get talked about. I'm like,
yeah.
wow. And that's when like even that to me was something where I was like, wow, that's the most interesting thing through a lot of this stuff is that the fact that it seems like why wouldn't they teach this in school? And it's like, oh, it's not our history. It's like it's a people's history.
Well, do you ever think that they don't teach it? I mean, as a woman, it's impossible not to think immediately, well, it's because it was women. And so often
That's
women's
how Russia thinks
contribution
of it. That's
in
how Russia
history
thinks
is
of it.
just like, well, okay, so we did a really interesting interview with a woman who has a specialty in spies, women spies who were working in World War II in England. And
Candy
these
Jones?
stories.
Candy Jones?
Oh, I don't remember hearing about someone named Candy Jones. And in fact, I'm not going to be able to remember any of the specific names. But what was incredible was that apparently there was a fair bit of use of women in peacetime work roles to support the military in World War I in England. And that was a real first, to bring women into sort of public service, right? Women could be teachers, they could be nurses, you know, and then usually they were moms at home, right? And they just kept up the home front while men went and fought in the war. So there was a little bit, they were out of the box a little bit. And after the war, all these women who filled all these jobs that men had to vacate because they were fighting, you know, in England, they were not happy. They didn't want to go back and be told you can't contribute. So World War II breaks out. And, you know, after the government had spent 10 years telling these women, oh, no, we don't need you anymore. You just go back and do your thing. They were sort of like, oh, actually, we could use your help after all. What would you come back out? And these women undertook such incredibly dangerous missions. And they were just doubly endangered because of the risk of rape and, you know, certain crimes that a woman is going to be more vulnerable to than a man behind enemy lines, but not just behind enemy lines. It was also on the home front. And some of their stories were just incredible. And they had to be deceptive to everybody in their world. They couldn't even tell their own families what they were doing. You know, that kind of blew my mind. I didn't realize that there was that depth of shall we say, opportunism. And I guess that goes right back to our beginning commentary about how government can behave so badly towards its people. You know, use up what people will offer, but you don't acknowledge it, don't celebrate it. You know, when Winston Churchill actually was pressed to comment on these women, apparently, he said, yeah, you know, this woman who died behind enemy lines, she did a good job for a woman.
That's
like, really?
that's the stupidest mindset is like, you should be, if like the reason why Russia doesn't go around, and they had, I think their last parade was like in, for these, they took the night witches out of the parade, for instance, because they wanted to show bigger airplanes and all these other types of figures that were, I guess, more manly or fit the description of what Russia thought was important. They ended up taking the night witches out, which kind of falls into like a secret history category. But it's that mindset of like, why are you thinking on the gender thing here? Why aren't you saying holy shit? Like, that's
Yes,
still
you
our
are a
country.
hero.
It's
What a
our
hero.
freaking,
Thank you.
yeah.
Right? Oh, yeah, I know. But again, I mean, I sound like a broken record here, Rob, but it's like, that's the power of culture right there. And the fact that someone would even say it. And, you know, Winston Churchill didn't mean anything bad by saying it. He was complimenting this woman, but in this obviously really backhanded, limited, you know, unproductive way.
You ever read a book? Like, I had one that really upset me, which was, it was a war, like a war story, or I don't know if it was made up or this thing, but it expressed so much the gender of the person, where it expressed so much that it was a woman. I'm like, well, fucking A, like, I get it. You mentioned it 50 times on the first page. I don't give a shit if it was a guy or a girl. That's us.
Tell me what they're doing.
That's representing home. Like, that's team us. That's what I'm saying, is that's the mindset
And
we need to
thank
be
you for
thinking
your
of.
sacrifice and your effort. Oh,
Yeah.
I know. Yep.
What's the
And it's been
fix?
happening forever. It's been happening forever. I mean, there's examples of women who were, you know, serving as pharaohs in ancient Egypt, for goodness sake, but of course only as a function of being a regent, you know, so an advisor to a younger male relative who was too young to assume the throne. And, you know, once that situation changed, generally they were out of power. And it doesn't mean they didn't do amazing things, right? But it would have never been possible otherwise. I mean, one really big exception to that, who is actually one of my favorite historical characters, is Queen Elizabeth I of England. I mean, she was a gender buster. She really was. But she did it in such a politically astute and clever way that it never bit her in the ass. And so she had one of the most sort of incredible, I mean, certainly longest, but also incredibly productive reigns in which the entire scope of England's role on the face of the earth in conjunction with other countries, politically and economically, was transformed. And she did it kind of by playing by playing her gender into it. She never agreed to marry at all, whether an English person or a foreign diplomat, a foreign prince, which would have been expected, of course, to produce an heir. And she just managed to keep everybody at bay. It's amazing she survived childhood. She was one of King Henry VIII's daughters. She was his daughter with Anne Boleyn, who obviously didn't do so well. Her head was cut off, right? Um, and she was sort of shut aside. But Henry, for all that he was rather a bore by all intents and purposes, as I can tell, really believed in educating girls as well as boys. So Elizabeth was incredibly well educated for the time. She spoke 5 languages, and she was skilled in all of the fine womanly arts as well. And she used it to her advantage. She led on all sorts of courtiers for years and kept them close and led them to believe that, oh, maybe I'll get married to you. Maybe not. Same with Prince Philip of Spain, for example, who actually ended up marrying her half sister in the end because she didn't do it. But
I think they did a lot of weird things back then, especially, but that's just because that was the mindset. Like I'm saying, it's the mindset of what it was at the time. I mean, the wigs, everyone says big wigs. I mean, supposed to mean what it means now is like you're rich, or oh, you're a big wig, you're all these types of things. I
well, you
was
had to be rich to have one at the time.
Yeah, but
So
that was started
was
all
yeah,
because of syphilis, though. Like so many
yeah,
people were
right.
developing
People
syphilis where they would put a white
losing
wig
their
on, and then
hair. Yeah.
eventually it turned into this competition. I have the biggest wig. It's like, does that mean you have more syphilis than I do? I don't understand. But it was like, no, I have more power than you. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, yeah, I have to say, fashion wise, the whole I think that late 17th, early 18th century is one of the least attractive in my mind. The really powdered face and the white wig with powder. Yeah, not a great
That's
look.
the first topic I was telling you about, the other podcast I was doing for a while. The first ever thing I researched was 19th century Victorian surgery. Government was later. My buddy just goes, I'm like, what are you interested in? He goes, 19th century Victorian surgery. I'm like,
That's a
fuck,
that's a really brutal topic.
that's specific as hell.
Like,
And I like
I
looked
know
at
it
him, I
is,
was
but there's
like,
like a lot of saws and things. It's not at all what you
so
think
I
about.
ended up learning so much about Robert Liston, Joseph Lister, all
Oh,
these other
cool.
types
All
of main
right.
figureheads
Yeah.
that were diving
And
into 19th century Victorian surgery. Why
they made it a
doctors
lot less
originally,
brutal.
yeah,
How
well,
interesting.
and it was very amazing to learn that type of stuff where I wouldn't have even thought twice if he would have never even pushed me to start researching those types of things. And I
Well,
think,
and that's a person you wonder, why isn't that person more in the news, right? I
yeah.
mean, coming up with things like chloroform to help make surgery more bearable. I
And
mean,
first of all, having Robert Liston, the guy that had a 300% kill rate, like how the hell does that happen? And he killed 3 people in one surgery. It's like, you read that account. I mean, I give doctors, like, the whole reason why doctors made house calls is it was safer to go to your house rather than you go to a hospital where you're going to die,
it was
because
filthy. Well, because they didn't understand you had to clean things, but they would just use the same tools with
they
one person to the next and the
They
smock. And oh my
slowly got it, though. He was like, hang on a second, let me put some
yeah.
water on this, but he didn't make it hot. And then next thing you know, we're like, hold on, let's try hot water. That actually helps. Because before that, I mean, when Robert Liston was doing the 300% kill surgery, he was chopping off a woman's foot. And then as he was moving so fast, she was going to die anyway. That's a big surgery even for
Yeah.
now. But
Yeah. Well, and you're right. You got to keep that into account as
he's
well, because
sticking
it was,
bloody blades in his mouth and switching back and forth. He's moving so
and
fast.
wiping it on the same smock he
during
wore for
during the
3 days.
process of swapping out the knives, he chopped his assistant's fingers off, which he later died of infection, and then also sliced a person's lab coat that was elderly, and he had a heart attack. And I'm like, bruh, you had one
That
job,
is so funny.
amputate the leg.
Well, he had to move quickly. It was a show, though. I mean, that's what we're operating theater. I mean, and
Yep.
it was a theater. It's mind blowing, right? They're all out watching.
People
Yeah.
are thinking you're saying like theater as in like plays. Think of it like in Frankenstein the movie
No,
when
it
they're
really was
showing the whole,
theater.
yeah,
It
but they
was
were
a
showing,
show.
it was everybody was sitting around in a room and they were showing you. It wasn't like a stage or anything. It was just they had this thing in the middle of the room that everybody could observe. It's like when you're
I
doing
know.
they do used I
Where
think
else are you going to see something like this?
exactly, but yeah, because that was entertainment. Same thing with like why people did hangings back in the day. Everybody wanted a show. They just want to see it all happen, and then eventually we're like, this seems really morally wrong.
Yeah.
That brings
Yeah.
up the death, the what is it, the death penalty. What
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
gonna hit them all. We've done all sorts of taboo topics today.
So I have to ask, what's better, Coke or Pepsi?
Oh, Coke.
This isn't a sponsor, but
No question. Hold that back up. I want to tell you something. This is actually a true story. So you see that logo?
yeah,
Have you ever seen the old Pepsi logo, or are you too young?
probably too young.
Okay. I worked for the ad guy who engineered that new logo for Pepsi, and it became this. You look it up. You like to look these things up. He sold this whole crazy bill of goods to Pepsi that you need to change this logo. That was one of the most powerful brands, most successful and recognizable in the world, and it got such a lot of pushback. It was
I didn't.
silly,
I did
but
not understand the taste difference between Pepsi and Coke until like last year.
well, what do you mean by understand?
I thought they were exactly the same. I was like, it
Oh
tastes.
no. But
Yeah,
I couldn't explain the taste. Can you explain the taste difference? Like I couldn't actually say this is why they taste different, but to me they taste really different. Can you?
I can't explain the difference. I can tell you why. What Dr. Pepper I think tastes like the most. I think it tastes like licorice because
Yeah, like cherry licorice.
that's what's in it is licorice.
Is it? It tastes like cherry licorice.
Did you know you can't eat more than what is it, 2 pounds of licorice in a sitting above the age of 40 because it's known to cause seizures?
Oh, I won't do that then. Thank you for
Yeah.
warning me.
I th- this is all information. I'm just like,
Why?
because
Where'd you find that?
I had a comedian on, I always mention him, Steve Cantwell, amazing guy. He had a seizure on an airplane because the type of thing that's in licorice, if too much of it, like if you eat a 2 pound bag of it or something, there's this certain ingredient in it that is known to cause seizures, and it's worse above the age of 40.
Wow. Oh, I won't do
Also,
it.
if you try sugar-free Haribo gummy bears, there is over 280,000 reviews on Amazon, and there's many videos on YouTube that you can look up of people crapping their brains out because the type of chemical they use to
That
make it
I've heard about.
sugar-free is
That I've heard about.
this is the real information they should be teaching in schools. I don't.
This is real history, isn't it?
Christopher Columbus can sail back over the
History of
ocean blue.
consumer products. I love it. My computer liked it too. It commented. All right.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking of that review where the guy's like, my butt exploded like Mount St. Helens. I was like,
Well,
oh
they all
my
seem to
God.
take place inconveniently on an airplane middle seat, full packed economy. I read some of those too. My children found this and thought it was hilarious
It is.
and
That's
showed
what,
it to me.
that's what I'm saying is if you look at people, everyone says, why is the government like this? They're supposed to be red, white, blue, and true. I'm like, hang on a second. Who runs the government? People. What are people known to do? Mess up. People are known to think irrationally. People are known to make mistakes, and people are
I
known to
can't
do
hear you
types of
all of a
things.
sudden. I am so sorry. I'm going to screw with your sound.
No. So with mistakes that people make and people think like, why the government would do this? I'm like, it's all people, and people are known to make mistakes. But the weird thing is we want change. We want to shift. This is a giant leap from the gummy bear example, but it's the fact of we're not willing to make the change. And people are like, what are you talking about? We're fighting for change right now. I'm like, but you're making the same mistakes. There was all this giant tension in our country, not only a few months ago, but it seems like right when we get to the freaking doorstep, we back away. And then it all has to rebuild again and get to
Oh,
this point. There's never that
so
breakthrough.
frustrating. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's another whole conversation. I don't think we have time to
I
get
think we've
involved in
talked
that.
about every stigmatized thing possible in this
I think
podcast.
we have.
But why is it stigmatized?
Well, it's because, and I think that to go back to where we started largely is that sometimes people aren't willing to actually have the conversation. They just get angry. They shut down. They say, no, you're wrong. And I'm not saying that people who do repugnant things are right. And I'm not going to be convinced that they're right. But, sometimes it's important to give people a chance to explain why they believe what they believe. And it's always eye-opening. And it doesn't mean it's going to change your mind. But I think it's the courtesy you owe other people to hear their viewpoints out.
I think that is important. I think that is probably something that a lot of people are going to hear, and it's going to fall on deaf ears at one point. But I think that, I really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate you for coming on and doing the podcast and everything too.
Thanks for inviting me. Very different from anything I've done. It was lots of fun.
We tried to stay on history, but we just kind of went into different directions, didn't we?
Well, you know why? I think, and I apologize if that just might be me. It's just my take on history actually is that we live history. It's all around us. And I am very excited about all sorts of interesting events in the past. But to me, what is most compelling is how we make history every day, right? And how we interpret things that happen in the past based on how we live in the present. And that's just because of the power of culture and the individual perspectives we all bring.
And that's what I love about conversation, is that see, you end up finding something like this. You end up talking to someone like yourself that has this amazing thing where we just literally did like almost, I think, an hour and 15 of just talking. And it was energetic. I feel pumped. Like I can go take on the day. And I appreciate you for coming out and doing the podcast. Please promote your podcast. Let everybody know where they can find you at.
Oh, yeah. Well, everyone who wants to see in practice what I've been kind of preaching this whole time with my view of history, my vision of it, Working Over Time is my podcast that I'm the host of. I produce it with two partners, Little Fire, which is a couple of guys in Providence, Rhode Island, who I work with directly, Aiden and Raz. They are awesome. And Past Preservers, run by Nigel Hetherington over here in the UK. And we just put together a show every week where I have a guest on who is expert in some interesting job that was done in the past. And it might be a job that doesn't exist anymore, or that has changed totally, but is still practiced in the present day. And we sort of go through a day in the life, put our listeners into the shoes of that person and kind of let them imagine what it would have been like. And a lot of it's pretty, hairy and challenging stuff. Sometimes it's just funny. And then we inevitably end up talking a lot about kind of the modern condition and how we live today, whether it's something to do with intolerance or climate change or politics or, you name it. And it's because, in my view, the more things change, the more they stay the same, because we're just human beings with only kind of a certain set of real needs to fulfill, to live. And that doesn't change. It's just how we actually make it happen. So
That's on Spotify,
yeah. Oh
YouTube.
yeah, we're on Spotify and iHeartRadio and Apple Podcasts.
All right. And I'll make sure to link everything in the description so people can find your work. Thank you for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.